Welcome in to episode 41 of the Woo Pig Weekly Podcast. Who will step up for the secondary this season? Who will be the leader of this Hog defense this year? We'll jump into that this week as we talk about our linebacker and secondary preview. Episode 41 is brought to you by Home Field, home of premium vintage collegiate apparel. Go check out all their Arkansas gear. It's fantastic. A lot of, different, era Razorbacks that they have, different sports, everything from football, must bus, baseball, whatever you have it, they got it. You can use the promo code Variety Sports in all caps to receive 15% off that first order. So go check it out today and get your next game day shirt or hoodie or pullover, hat, whatever you want to go check it out today. So we'll jump in here with some updates with our preseason award watch lists. We've got KJ Jefferson with the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award watch list. And then we've also got Luke Haas has been named to the Freshman of the Year watch list, which is exciting for, he's been raved about in all of camp. So he's a guy that, high expectations, and let's see if we can live up to those hypes.
Yeah, I'm stoked about him, man. I heard nothing but good things. I think his chemistry is getting stronger and stronger. So it's always nice to see some of your freshmen getting named to some of these watch lists like that, just based off of their performance in camp and what they've seen from some of the scouting reports and stuff. So that's really exciting to see.
I think it's big for him, especially as a freshman, to be listed as a starter on week one depth chart. That's big, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And then a couple of recruiting tidbits here. We've got Arkansas over the weekend landed 2026 defensive back Tay Lockett. He is expected to be a five-star prospect, with it being a class of 2026, not necessarily ranked yet per se for like you're recruiting people like Rivals and 24/7 and ESPN. So he's a guy that's a big commitment for Coach Travis Williams and this defense. Then we also got a commitment from 2026 offensive lineman Bear McWhorter. And if that name sounds familiar, you might just remember it from a billboard that was posted here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, with him asking Coach Pittman to be a Hog. Well, now that offer's come, and he is committed to Coach Pittman to come play for Arkansas.
Yeah, that's an awesome story, man. Kind of made its way around Twitter and Facebook and everything. A lot of people were pretty excited to see that billboard pay off. I think there was already some recognition from the university to him before that billboard, but it made for a pretty cool story.
That's very true, and it's exciting to see him committed. And like we said, before, these are class of 2026 commitments, so that, it's great to have these kids committed, but it's nothing really super serious until it gets closer to, signing day, and that's 3 years away. So, something to keep an eye out with that. I think that's a good sign for recruiting here, that Pittman's got it headed in the right direction with some of these guys we've got on staff now. So we'll jump into our position group breakdowns this week as we're going to cover the linebackers and secondary for this defense. And we'll jump in with, one of the guys that is stepping up big this year and filling some shoes left by Bumper Pool and, Drew Sanders. You've got redshirt sophomore Chris Paul Jr. slated as a starter on this Arkansas defense. He's 6'1", 233. He did play in all 13 games last season, where he started twice. One of those being in that bowl game with Drew Sanders and Bumper Pool both setting out of that game. He finished the season with 62 total tackles, 38 solo tackles, 24 assisted tackles, 8 tackles for losses, 4 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. I think he's a guy that could have a big jump this year and could be a key piece for this Arkansas defense.
Yeah, man, I actually thought I saw a big jump last year just in his kind of game one to the last game of the season. I thought he looked like I'm not going to say totally different player, but it just seemed like he really found his stride and found his role on the team last year, about midway through the season. And he's one of the people that I really expect to kind of be one of those on-field generals. Him and drawing a blank now, defensive lineman we've raved about. Anyways, I expect those two guys to really be some of your main leaders out there on the field. Chris Paul Jr.'s got the talent, all that ability, but I'm excited to see his ability to kind of really lead the defense in a sense and make sure everybody's lined up correctly in position, understand what's coming. I mean, I think he really showed spurts last year of being able to read plays before they happened and was always in the right place at the right time, and really excited to watch him play this year, man. I think he's going to have a breakout year, even more so than maybe last year.
Agreed. He showed tremendous growth last year, and I think this year you can't you can only hope for more with him sliding to a starting role, like you said, being one of those on-field generals. And another guy that will help, that will be on the field alongside him, is redshirt junior Jaheim Thomas. He is a transfer that came in from Cincinnati, so we got to see him last year in the opening matchup against Cincinnati last season. He's a 6'4", 240-pound linebacker. He played in all 13 games for Cincinnati last year, had 70 total tackles, 25 solo, 45 assisted, 6.5 tackles for losses, and 2 sacks. One thing that stands out for me for him specifically is you look at his size. He's 6'4" and 240. So he's not only big, but he's also taller in size than maybe your average linebacker. So, that'll let him be able to assist in, maybe getting some pass breakups, or, be able to swat some balls down from, behind the line and whatnot. So, what do you see out of this guy?
Yeah, I vaguely remember watching him play in that first game of the year last year. Obviously, the size is great. I definitely think that's going to be critical. I think the speed was pretty impressive, was one of the main things I recall. But yeah, just adding bodies out there, man. Obviously, Chris Paul is going to be kind of your leader, but you got to have a good tandem of other guys around him. Come in, can come out, keep some fresh legs on the field. I think this was a great pickup.
And then another guy that's slated in your starting role is you got sophomore Jordan Crook, 6', 220 pounds. Another guy that played in all 13 games last year with 1 start. He had 12 total tackles, 8 solo, 4 assisted, and a half a tackle for loss. So another guy is very similar to Chris Paul that, rotated in and played a little bit last year. Last year, we clearly had our workhorses with Drew Sanders and Bumper Pool. So not a lot of rotation there when you got guys like that on the field. But Jordan Crook's another guy that has been raved about in camp and, has had a good fall and summer, and that could come in and contribute big here too.
Yeah, it's the best part about him is he's played with Chris, and so I think those guys are going to be on the same page from day one. So that's going to be nice having 2 guys that have had quite a few reps together. I think they were on the field together a lot of those times. I'm just kind of being the rotate in type players. And then obviously late in the year when Bumper and Drew were sitting out. So I'm excited just on the chemistry that they may already have, just kind of bleeding over from last year and where that development will take them. So the starting linebackers look pretty solid to me, man. I just don't know how else to say it.
Agreed. I think we're going to have some youth in this linebacking room, but also with a little bit of experience because, you've got Jaheim Thomas that, has experience with Cincinnati, been part of their successful program as, Luke Fickell moved on from there after last season, but, understands what a successful program looks like and can bring in some of that, mentality into this Arkansas program and mentor these young guys here. And, some young guys we're going to talk about that are going to be in that kind of reserve role that will also probably be part of a rotational kind of thing as we go into the season. Like you said, keeping fresh legs, is redshirt junior Brooks Both. He's a 6', 230-pound linebacker that played in 9 games last season, but mainly on special teams, so no stats for him. Another guy we're going to talk about, freshman Brad Spence, 6'2", 237. He actually enrolled early this year, had 85 total tackles, 12 tackles for losses, 8 sacks, 13 quarterback hurries in high school. So he's a guy that I've heard good things about in camp, that could, bring good depth to this linebacker room.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd be shocked to not see these guys in week 1, considering who we're playing. I hope you get a lot of these kind of guys out there to get some in-game reps. That's who you're going to need later down the road. Just to kind of, like we said, keep legs fresh. It's a grueling, brutal season. So these guys, even though they're freshmen, maybe a little bit younger, they're going to be critical pieces, man. They really are.
Yeah, and then the last guy here in the linebacker room we're going to talk about is freshman Alex Sanford. He's 6'1", 227. A key note here is he was a 3-star prospect out of high school, but he is a guy that committed to Arkansas out of Oxford, Mississippi, right down in Ole Miss territory. So, we mentioned it earlier before. It's good that we can go into, Mississippi and grab, players right out from under programs like Ole Miss and Mississippi State, especially right in the heart of Oxford too. He's a guy that had 104 total tackles, 18 tackles for losses, 9 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, and 1 pass breakup. So a guy that's very much got a nose for the ball, and I think just can bring some more intensity to this linebacking room.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be some developmental need from some of these guys, for future years. But I really do think that we're in a fairly good spot for this season at linebacker. And with some of these guys being able to maybe get some early game reps, late game reps, later in the season, things of that nature, we're setting the footwork to have a pretty good development system for our linebacking room.
Yeah, that's true. And then, so I expect good things out of this linebacker room. Like we said, Chris Paul is probably going to be those leaders on defense. We kind of saw that a little bit last year as he stepped up, in the absence of, like we said, Drew Sanders and Bumper Pool. So, exciting things to come from that linebacking room. But now we'll jump over to, I think, one of the most interesting position groups we're going to talk about that, quite frankly, was terrible last season, and that's the secondary. You know, not necessarily in a bad way, but we got struck with that injury bug extremely hard in that secondary room. And we had true freshmen playing guys that really hadn't probably planned to play a whole lot last year and got thrown into starting roles, big rotational roles. But Pittman did a really good job addressing that in the offseason. We're going to talk about that here. But one guy that's going to be a starter and a returner that's going to be a key piece to that secondary is senior Dwight McGlothern, 6'2", 188. He did start all 13 games for last season for Arkansas, so one of the key pieces that didn't really deal with too much injury last year. He had 52 total tackles with 43 solo tackles, 9 assisted tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 14 pass deflections, and 4 interceptions for Arkansas last season.
Yeah, obviously McGlothern's going to be, one of our highlight players on defense. He's on the Bronco Nagurski Trophy watch list. We talked about that a couple episodes back, which is the top defensive player in the country. So he's already got some recognition out there. I think teams are going to know that coming in and maybe try to scheme to not throw his way, things of that nature. So you are going to have some other guys step up if they do try to shy away from McGlothern. So he's such a freak, though. He's going to be in plays. It's just how he is. He's got a nose for the ball. He's going to find ways to get in plays even when they don't throw his way. I mean, he's so fun to watch, man. He really is one of the more fun to watch cornerbacks that we've had in a while.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And another guy that you've got to look at that kind of will be a backup to him or a rotational role is redshirt senior Ladarius Bishop, 6', 183. He played in 2 games last season before he missed the rest of the season with a knee injury, but a guy that I'm sure is itching to get back out there and, work his way up into some rotational and decent playing time for Arkansas, a guy that kind of a home state kid that, came from down in Southwest Arkansas, near where Seth and I grew up. And so he's a guy that could be a key piece in Arkansas's secondary rotation this season.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, we'll talk about a couple more guys, but depth is so critical at some of these positions, man. And that's one thing that really hurt us last year. I mean, I know you were talking about having some freshmen come in and play last year. We had wide receivers transitioning over. I mean, it was just finding bodies to get out on the field in the secondary, and hopefully we're in a way better position this year for lengthened success.
Yeah, last year was definitely all hands on deck for sure. Another guy that could be a key piece for this, Arkansas team this year is redshirt senior Kee'yon Stewart, 6', 185. He's actually a transfer from TCU, another experienced player coming from a TCU team that made the college football playoffs, understands winning and success and that mentality that it takes to get there. He played in all 13 games for TCU last year and had 14 total tackles, 3 pass breakups, and 1 forced fumble. So another depth guy that brings also a ton of experience that he can share with this, secondary room that could be critical for Arkansas this year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's crazy to pick up somebody from a team like that made it all the way to college football playoff, but I think that was a good get. I think he's trying to find a little bit more playing time overall. He played in all those games, but I don't think he was on the field as much as maybe he wanted to be. So it's a great job going out and getting somebody like that's hungry.
Yeah, that's very true. And another guy that I think is the most surprising and anticipated guy in the secondary is redshirt freshman Jaheim Singletary, 6'2", 187. He is a transfer from Georgia. He redshirted last year, meaning he only played in 3 games, but he is a 5-star prospect. Not only he came into this program late into the summer, coming in August summer practice, but only being with this team a couple months, and he is already slated to start. I think that just kind of shows you what kind of talent he has, not only athletic ability, but also in that football IQ world. I think this is going to be a big get for Arkansas and could be a key contributor for the secondary this season, along with Dwight McClellan.
Yeah, I completely agree with that take. I think he is kind of the highlight name on the list. That's the unknown, but the ceiling and potential is so high for him. I mean, he's already on the starting list. I don't know what's coming. I've never really seen him play a whole lot from a college standpoint, but from what everybody's saying and the talent level that's associated with him, there is nothing that he's going to do that's not going to help us, if that makes sense. I mean, that's some of the added depth we really, really needed, especially at a high talent level.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's going to be one of those things. If he pans out like his 4-star or 5-star talent, he's recruited to Georgia by Kirby Smart for a reason. That's going to be a big pickup for our Sam Pittman in Arkansas, especially with if he stays for a couple more years and, develops into a really locked down corner. And then the last guy here at cornerback we're going to talk about is freshman Jalen Braxton, 6', 185. He is a 4-star prospect that played both wide receiver and cornerback in high school. He finished his high school career with 27 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 10 pass breakups, 5 interceptions, and 1 field goal block. So another, guy that's got a ton of talent and has worked his way into a rotational role here, is not necessarily starting, but could see a lot of playing time early in the season as we have some of those non-conference matchups.
Yeah, I'm excited about Jalen Braxton, man. I've watched his high school highlights that were posted a few months back, but the dude can fly to the ball. There's a reason he's got 10 pass breakups and 5 picks. He's kind of got that ball hawk type cornerback mentality. There's some guys out there that just kind of have that built-in knack for that, and he seemed like one of those guys. So it's going to be cool to have him on the hill and just see what his development brings over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I agreed with that 100%. Seems like a lot of these guys we're talking about, it seems like they all really have a nose for the ball, really goes after that, a little more aggressive approach to, playing that secondary, defensive back position. And so now we'll jump over to our nickelback spot, where slated to start for Arkansas this year is redshirt junior Lorando Snacks Johnson. He is a guy that he transferred over from Baylor. He's 6', 193. He started all 12 games for Baylor, where he had 16 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for losses, 1 forced fumble, and 5 pass breakups. So another guy that brings in some experience, understands the game, how the defenses work, and I think can be a key contributor for this defense as well.
Yeah, I thought he was a big pickup from Baylor, and we got another one as well. We'll talk about in a minute in the safety room. But Snacks Johnson, man, it's just added depth that we just didn't have, and talented added depth. Somebody that, like you said, has got really, really solid college football games under his belt already, and so that's going to be critical for us, having some guys out there that can kind of help lead some of these younger fellas. And I have high expectations, man.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And another guy that's generated some excitement is you got freshman TJ Metcalf, 6'1", 206. He was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school. And if that name sounds familiar, he's the cousin of current wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, DK Metcalf, and you know what type of player he is. So if he has remotely any percentage of those genes, this dude's going to be a stud. He in high school, he finished with 65.5 total tackles, 2 tackles for losses, 10 pass breakups, 1 interception, 3 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, and did play both ways in high school at wide receiver and defensive back.
Yeah, he came in with a ton of hype. I think a little bit of the hype comes with his last name, frankly. I mean, people recognize that name. There's a reason for that. So like you say, if he's half the athlete that DK is, I mean, the kid's just going to be a phenom from an athletic standpoint. So it's cool to get guys like that, man. And they provide a little bit of that extra hype around the university and a little bit of added spotlight on the university as a whole, plus him as a player. So those are good things.
Yeah, and a quick peek to the future. I think we've got, it's either his cousin or brother that's another Metcalf that's recruited to Arkansas that it should be coming in next season as well. So loading up on that talent on the defensive side there. And then we'll jump over to our safety position, where slated in to start for Arkansas this season is Alfahim Al-Walcott. He's 6'2", 210. He's another transfer from Baylor that came in with Snacks Johnson. He did play in all 13 games for Baylor with 12 starts, had 82 total tackles, 10 tackle for losses, 2 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 1 interception, and 4 pass breakups, and he had 2 games with 10-plus tackles. So, that tells me right there that this is a guy that knows how to go after the ball, go after those offensive players, and just make some plays.
Yeah, another key thing is I think he was really, really solid at understanding what the offensive schemes were showing and being able to be in the right place at the right time. You mix that with guys like Chris Paul, people like that, for example. You're going to have these guys that are getting hats on ball for run plays, slant pass plays, things like that. They're going to be there to blow up those plays because their recognition is so off the charts. You can really see that with his stats just from Baylor. Obviously, there's maybe a little bit of an increase in the talent you're going to face when you're at SEC. So the jury's still out on how well these guys can kind of transition into that. But Baylor is not a slouch of a program. They develop players really well down there. So I would be shocked to see these guys struggle greatly in the SEC. I think they're going to be huge for us, dude. I really do.
Couldn't agree with you more there. A few more guys we're going to talk about here in the safety, role is redshirt senior Malik Chavis, 6'2", 194, played in 12 games last season for Arkansas, started 6 of those due to, like we mentioned before, all the injury bug that's happened to Arkansas. He stepped up and started in 6 games. He had 15 total tackles, 7 solo, 8 assists. So another guy that, like we've said, time and time again, depth is going to be key for Arkansas, and he's another guy that brings a lot of depth for Arkansas here in this program, especially being experienced as a redshirt senior.
Very true.
And then we'll jump over to one of the either you could call it fan favorites or most frustrating player for fans is redshirt senior Hudson Clark, Hud Island. He's 6'2", 188, bulked up a little bit this offseason, kind of switching over to that more of a safety type role instead of DB. He played in 13 games last season where he started 10 of those, 67 total tackles, 33 solo tackles, 34 assisted tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 12 pass deflections, and 1 interception last season for Hudson Clark.
Yeah, he had some pretty solid stats. Let's be real. He had at times been frustrating for Hog fans, especially when he was playing corner. I don't think the speed translated to the SEC quite like they were hoping for Hudson. No, not knocking the guy at all, but whenever he switched over to the safety position where he's coming a little bit more downhill and not having to keep up with those wideouts, I think everything started to kind of click. If that makes sense. I felt like I saw his production level take a huge jump just as far as the plays he was involved in. He was able to kind of keep up with the plays that were happening. Everything was happening in front of him. I just felt like he fit better, and I think he felt like he fit better in that position. So I will say with a season of partially playing safety under his belt, I've got high expectations for Hudson Clark. He's one of those guys that I really think could have a breakout season, if that even makes sense, even though he's had some good seasons for us in the past. He's had kind of one of those crazy highlight games against Ole Miss 2 years ago with the 3 interceptions and all that. It was wild. So had some really highlight plays for Arkansas already, or highlight games, I guess I should say. But I don't know. I just kind of got a feeling that he's going to have a little bit more of a highlight year where he doesn't have as many of those ugly plays on his resume this year. I think he'll be in a better position to kind of just have the good highlight plays all year long, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it seemed like last year he always came in some clutch situations last year, no matter what, he could have had a bad play or two a game, but it always seems when he needed to come up clutch, he did, whether that be a big stop, a big, tackle, pass deflection, whatever it may be. He seemed to come in those clutch times last year.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the final guy we're going to talk about here today is junior Jaden Johnson, 6'2", 206. He played in 12 games last season, 7 starts. Finished the season with 35 total tackles, 18 solo tackles, 17 assists, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, and 1 forced fumble. So another guy that has experience, junior, stepped up last year big when we needed him to, and will be great depth for Arkansas here at the safety, or, a lot of these guys, even though they're slated in the safety spot, slated in the nickelback spot, they can all shift around and play in those secondary roles. Guys are, learn to play all those different type of roles. That way they can be more versatile in the defenses they go to play in.
Yeah, it's gonna be nice to have some of these guys that are coming back with some experience, and then obviously 3 of the transfers coming in with significant experience. You're replacing a few faces, but not just a ton, honestly, from the secondary standpoint compared to last year. So I really think our experience level compared to last year took a huge jump between the guys that returned plus the guys that transferred in. So that's going to do nothing but good things for us. And then I think we've talked about it at a lot of these other positions as well. But I think from top to bottom, your talent level, even in your backup players, is a little bit higher than I think we've had over the last few years. So you're not going to see as much of a drop off whenever, you got to have Drop McLaughlin come out for a couple plays, get a breather. I don't think you're going to have the significant drop off that we've had in the years previous, frankly.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that was, big of Pittman, like we mentioned. He went out and addressed that where we struggled last year, went in and brought in tons of experience, tons of talent that hopefully will be on display for Arkansas this season and what should be a much improved secondary. So I'm excited to see what the secondary is going to do, what this defense is going to do. We talked about it. I think, Dwight McClellan is going to be one of these key leaders on the defense, especially back in the secondary, kind of helping make sure guys are lined up. Chris Paul is going to be kind of, like you said, one of those field generals that's going to help, lead this defense. And, a guy that we talked about him last week, defensive end, that's going to be
Landon Jackson.
That's going to be a key piece to step up this year. With those three guys, I think there's a lot of upside and, potential for this defense to be really good this year.
Yeah, they can't be a whole lot worse from a passing defense standpoint compared to last year. So only ways up, man.
It's very true. And so we'll take a quick break here and we'll be back and cover some other scores and sports news. And then we'll also have our game day preview for this week's game.
You know what I like? I like to be comfortable. I also love representing my favorite sports teams. And in the Clutch, I am able to have the best of both worlds. In the Clutch Apparel is your one-stop shop for all things sports. They have officially licensed gear from all your favorite teams and players from the NHL, MLB, NFL, and more. They have sports classic tees from yesteryear and beyond. Check out their full website in the link down below. When you enter the promo code Variety Sports, you get 10% off everything site-wide. Feel comfortable with your sports apparel and go over to their website now at intheclutch.com. And don't forget to use our code Variety Sports to get 10% off.
All right, we are back here from break, and we'll jump over to Arkansas soccer, where Seth will walk us through some games of this past week and let us know what our soccer team's doing.
Yeah, man. So Arkansas took on Oregon. We kind of previewed it last week, and they did end up winning this match 4-0. They scored their 4 goals off of 20 shot attempts, 9 of those shots being on target. So some pretty solid percentages there and a very high number of shots taken. So a really good outing for the Razorback soccer team. Morgan White scored Arkansas's first goal at the 3-minute mark, so didn't waste a whole lot of time there. She got an assist from Sophia Aragon on that goal. And then not too long later, Sophia Aragon got a goal of her own at the 18-minute mark to score Arkansas's second goal of the match. 2 minutes after that, Morgan White scored her second goal of the match, almost got the hat trick. And then for the last goal of the match, Emma John scored at the 44-minute mark to cap off a fairly tremendous first half. All 4 of our goals came in the first half against Oregon. No goals recorded by either club in the second half, so Arkansas held on for the comfortable 4-0 victory. Then turning around a couple days later, we took on number 12 Notre Dame. This was honestly Arkansas's first true test against the number 12 Fighting Irish. Unfortunately, neither team could claim the edge as the match ended in a 2-2 draw. So Arkansas finished with a tally of 13 total shots, with 3 of those being on target. Notre Dame had 10 shots, with 5 of theirs being on target. So this was actually a really, really great showing for Arkansas's goalkeeper, Sierra Cotillard, as she kept Arkansas in this match with 3 saves on those 5 shots on target. So Arkansas's first goal was scored by Sophia Aragon at the 22-minute mark with an assist from Avery Wren. Morgan White scored our second goal of the match at the 50-minute mark to give Arkansas the lead 2-1 at that point. Then, unfortunately, Arkansas led all the way up to the 85-minute mark when Ellie Osbeck tied the match for Notre Dame to give us our final score of 2-2. So kind of a tough draw, especially considering we led most of this match. But Notre Dame's a really, really solid team. I don't think you can be very disappointed with a draw. You got to take those when they happen and be glad that you didn't lose, frankly. So overall, a couple of really good games for Arkansas soccer. I think you've got a couple of names starting to stand out that are going to be your highlight players that you kind of hear those names off and on all year long, with Sophia Aragon, Morgan White, a couple of names like that. So it's been an exciting year so far, and I think we're really going to kind of get into the meat of the schedule going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, Kobe Hale has really brought in some talent for this team and has this team slated for another, fantastic year. Just from these first few games, they seem to be, getting out there, starting aggressive with all these goals scored right at the beginning of the game, just a few minutes in. That's what you like to see. Be aggressive, take that lead early and be able to hopefully capitalize on that. Like you said, tough match with Notre Dame, but that was a real tough test, as they were ranked 12th in the country. Watching that game, it was back and forth. We scored, or they took the lead, and then we came back with the equalizer, got it tied up, and it was just back and forth. And the ball ended up, not really going either team's way, and you end up with a draw. But that's going to happen in soccer sometimes. But Arkansas's got a big matchup coming up this weekend, which we'll tell you about here in a little bit in our upcoming events. So now we'll jump over to Arkansas volleyball, where Arkansas had their first matchup of the season against Michigan State, where they picked up the 3-0 sweep. They followed that up with their second matchup against Tulsa, where they got another 3-0 sweep, and it's starting off the season with, 2 series wins there. Arkansas is currently ranked 21st in the country, but we have some key matchups starting tonight and tomorrow, as Arkansas will take on number 1 team in the country, Wisconsin, in Fayetteville tonight and tomorrow, like I said. And so we'll exactly see how Arkansas is going to stack up against one of the best squads in the country here. Get out there if you can. I know Hunter Yurichek's been asking all the support we can. This is a big matchup for Arkansas, number 1 coming in the building. Hopefully maybe we can steal a win, split the series, something, and, show that this Arkansas volleyball team isn't to be pushed around.
Yeah, man, that's really true. There's so much history in Barnhill, too, where they play. So it's always fun to go watch the volleyball girls in a historic arena like that. I expect this to be a big event in Fayetteville, especially for the students. It seems like the students always really show up and show out for some of these big volleyball matchups. I know we had a couple really cool matchups last year. I think they even had one in Bud Walton that was practically a sellout in volleyball considerations. So there's a lot of support from the university. Hunter Yurchek, kind of like you were saying, is out there advertising for them and everything. So y'all get out there and watch them if you can. It's definitely going to be a huge matchup. And if you're a volleyball fan, this is going to be about as good as it gets.
Agreed. And now we'll jump over to, the exciting thing. It's here, Seth. Football season is upon us. We are just a few days away from that first kickoff down in Little Rock, where Arkansas is going to take on Western Carolina on September 2nd at 12 p.m. Just a heads up, that game time was changed from 3 p.m. to 12 p.m. due to temperature and hot weather and humidity down in central Arkansas. So that has been backed up to a 12 p.m. start, but this should be a, good opening game for Arkansas to just get out there and kind of knock off the rust and get ready for, jumping right in with a tough matchup next week against BYU or Kent State, and then BYU later on before we go on a big road stretch. But here we'll talk about this Western Carolina matchup, where Arkansas starts at a 34.5 point favorite. I think this comes to be expected from a Western Carolina team that's finished 6-5 last season. They averaged 31.9 points per game in 2022, where they also allowed 31.9 points per game. So a lot of close games for them. They did average 485.4 yards per game last season, 301 passing at 184 rushing, and they allowed 390.5 yards per game, 207 passing at 182.7 rushing yards per game last season for the Western Carolina Catamounts. So what do you see from, the potential of this Western Carolina matchup?
Yeah, the first thing that sticks out is being a 35-point favorite, pretty much. I think it's doable. I also think it might be a bit steep. Because I do think we're going to, have some plays that probably are miscues, things of that nature. And we may have some defensive plays where we mess up our coverage assignment or something like that. So I could see us maybe not covering the spread in this game. I could see us covering the spread. I can make an argument either way. I think our talent level is tremendously outmatching against the Western Carolina Catamounts. So that's the first thing that kind of sticks off to me is a exclamation point type thing. I could see arguments either way that it's the first game of the season. Both teams are going to be jittery. Both teams are going to make mistakes. Who can make the least amount of mistakes? Who can capitalize on the other team's mistakes? I think we've got a good chance at maybe getting some turnovers early and putting this thing on ice pretty quick and getting some of our, secondary, third string players in and kind of seeing what we've got from an overall depth standpoint. But you can't ever count anybody out, especially early in the season when you still don't know all your ins and outs yet, potentially. So they're not somebody to sleep on. They definitely put up a lot of yards per game last year. So that's something that's also a pretty critical factor I think we're going to need to watch for. But I do expect us to win this game. I mean, who wouldn't expect us to win this game? Let's be real.
Right. And so we're going to talk about a few players to watch for with Western Carolina. One guy you got to talk about is Cole Gonzalez. He's 6'1", 195. They're starting quarterback, a guy that split time a little bit last year with another guy that, he transferred out. So, it's all on Cole this season. He finished 102 pass completions out of 161 attempts with a 63.4 completion percentage. He had 1,336 yards last season with 11 TDs and 7 interceptions, where he averaged 8.3 yards per pass attempt, was sacked 8 times, and then he also rushed 43 times for 147 yards with 3.4 yards per carry and 1 touchdown. So, not a super threat with his legs, but also, maybe a little careless with the ball with, a close, 11-7 touchdown interception ratio that will have a full season starting under his belt. So what do you think from the numbers on the Western Carolina starting quarterback?
Yeah, that's just kind of doing a brief preview. That's kind of where I think we might can get some turnovers early and really kind of put the pedal to the metal and put this game away early. I would expect there's probably some improvement that's been made with Cole. So he may be a little bit better than maybe on paper shows here. So like I said, you can't count your eggs before they hatch, but I do see us maybe being able to take advantage of some early turnovers. I think our defense is in a prime position to get some turnovers, things like that. We've got some real studs like we talked about earlier in the episode. So I would be kind of shocked if we don't get in this guy's grill a little bit, rattle him around early, and maybe force some turnovers early.
Yeah, I couldn't said it better. Guy that, a little bit on the shorter side for a quarterback. So a guy that, and, not necessarily super mobile. So like Seth said, get after him, let Landon Jackson come off the edge and, bring the heat and, show him what this Arkansas defense is about. Another guy to talk about for the Western Carolina Catamounts is their running back, Desmond Reed. He comes in the season at 5'8", 170, smaller type of running back that, little guy like, Seth mentioned before the show, kind of reminds you of a little bit of Deuce Vaughn, maybe not as small, but still on the smaller side when you compare him to, say, KJ and Rocket that are 6'3", 6'2" guys that, can bring a little bit more of a punch. Last season for Western Carolina, he had 117 rushes for 824 yards, 7 yards per carry with 4 touchdowns, and he also had 21 receptions for 212 yards and 1 touchdown. So what's your take on this running back for Western Carolina?
Yeah, just based off his stats, I mean, it looked like he had a really, really good year last year. 7 yards a carry. I don't really care how big or small you are. That's pretty stout. So he is the one player on this lineup, essentially, that does kind of give me some concern. He's going to be a smaller, shiftier kind of running back, and that's probably somebody that our defensive players aren't used to tackling. So if he's able to kind of squirt out of some tackles, things like that, be a little bit more shifty than maybe they're used to just from some of our guys that they play against every single day, which are, like you said, some big bruisers. I feel like Desmond Reed could give us a little bit of trouble. But we'll just have to see. I think a lot of it's going to depend on how well their offensive line is able to hold up against our defensive line. I think that's going to be where the battle's really won in the trenches and how well a game Desmond Reed's actually able to have. But just based off last year's stats, I mean, he looks like he could really be somebody that could burn us for a play or two.
Very true. It's going to be something, we look out for, but hopefully, that's where these linebackers and DBs are going to come in clutch. Don't let him break the edge, but if he does, that's where you got to go in and clean up, finish out these plays and not let them, break off big runs and whatnot. And the final guy we're going to talk about here is wide receiver Sincere Lee. He is their second leading receiver from last year, and he's going to be slated for the number one guy this year. He comes in at 5'11", 170. He had 35 receptions last season for 626 yards and 6 touchdowns with an average of 17.9 yards per catch. So a guy that can make some plays, not necessarily the biggest guy out there in terms of size or weight, but, was able to put up 626 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. So what do you see with this wide receiver that Western Carolina is bringing in?
Man, I really don't know. It seems to me like he's probably kind of one of those Isaiah Sategna kind of top players that's out there for his speed. So that would be one thing I would watch for. I've never seen him play. Unfortunately, I haven't watched a ton of tape on Western Carolina or anything like that. So I'm curious to see exactly how fast he is and how he stacks up with our corners, with how fast they are. I mean, is there a disparity there one way or the other? That's going to be kind of one of the things I'm watching for here. I think a lot of it, honestly, on how good of a game he's going to have one way or the other is obviously on Cole Gonzalez. Are we able to get pressure on the quarterback? That's going to make everybody's lives a lot more miserable than it would be otherwise for their offense. So if we're able to get pressure early, I think we can almost, kind of eliminate Sensory Lee from being a factor in this game. So the jury's still out on how that's going to go, but that's kind of my hope for the game.
Yeah, this could be a good test for, our DBs and, get to see some speed before ramping up to that SEC caliber guy, type of receiver. So those are our guys to watch out for or keep an eye on for Western Carolina. Now we're going to flip the script here and talk about players to watch for Arkansas. And we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the top guy that everybody's talking about that they're excited to see play, tight end Luke Haas. Freshman, come in, put on not a lot of weight, but a decent amount of weight, and has really been drawing big, raving reviews out of fall camp, and has earned that tight end 1 starting role. So we'll get to see what he does in a college uniform in a college game, but the hype's there, and I'm excited to see what he does.
Yeah, I am too. I think one thing we're gonna see, I don't really know how to phrase this exactly, but I don't expect us to open up the playbook a whole lot, especially in week 1, week 2. You probably start to see it opening up against BYU in week 3. But I do think that Dan Enos is going to see the need to maybe open up the playbook for the tight ends a bit just to get them those reps that they're going to need, because that's kind of one of the bigger question mark positions. Maybe a little bit of wide receiver also. You may see some plays that maybe you wouldn't see in years past just to try to get that chemistry flowing earlier than maybe normal, because obviously KJ and Rocket, the run game's going to be there, all that. So I do expect us to run the ball more than pass the ball in this game to an extent. I expect it to be somewhat more balanced than maybe years past, but I'm curious to see exactly how the mix goes, how much they open up the playbook for guys like Luke Haas, or how much they try to save them. I would, in my imagination, think you want to use them at least to a decent extent just to kind of get those in-game reps that they're going to be so critical. But I could also see the flip side of that, not want to show your cards too early and show what kind of stud you actually have, maybe save him for a bigger matchup to where you utilize him a little bit more and catch somebody off guard from a film standpoint. So I don't know. I'm excited to watch pretty much every aspect of this game. He's definitely a big name I'm going to be watching for, though, just to see, does he live up to the hype that everybody's talking about?
Very true, and I think he's one of the most talented tight ends, and excitement about a player like this since the Hunter Henry days, where he came in and right away just showed he was a stud from Arkansas that knows how to play that tight end position with the very best of them, and who was that offensive coordinator? Dan Enos, the guy that's here now. So, I think that's high expectations for a freshman, but with those high expectations, there's a lot of talent here, and so we'll see if he lives up to those. Another few guys that we're gonna watch for Arkansas, the guys we've talked about: Brad Spence, Alex Sanford, some young linebackers, to see how they come to this program hopefully this is a game that's pretty well sealed by half and they get some good in-game reps at second half late in the game. Hopefully once it's in hand and that kind of thing. A couple other guys, 2 defensive linemen, Ian Gefford and Quincy Rose, 2 other guys that Coach Pittman said he's excited to see get out there and get some of those in-game reps for Arkansas. So I think this is going to be a good game for Arkansas to get young guys experience, get some rust knocked off for those experienced players that we're getting ready to ramp up the season here. And, just a lot of excitement around, KJ in a quote today to the press, they said, well, what do you need to do in this game, to avoid a similar situation to Missouri State last year where it kind of came down to the end of the game. He said, we've got to start early and eliminate all hope to begin with at the beginning of the game, kind of start out fast, strike first, and put up those points early.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with his take on that, man. That's going to be what I'm watching for from an offensive standpoint is how hard we press on the gas early. I think we will. Like I said, I don't think we're going to open up the playbook for anything crazy. I think the expectation is Rocket's going to get out there, rip off some big runs behind our offensive line. That's another thing I'm going to be really watching for from Luke Haas. If we're not passing the ball just a ton, and he is still our tight end 1 when he's out there, how well is he performing on run block situations? That's one of those things that people kind of overlook a lot from the tight end standpoint. They want to see the catches and the touchdowns and all that stuff, but how effective are they from a run block standpoint? So that's going to be one of the things I watch very intently from him. So I'm hoping we come out the gate strong, get things going, run the ball really well, are able to kind of put this one away, like you said, by halftime, and then see some of our backups really come in there and see what they're made of, get them some of those critical in-game reps, and just see where we're at from a team top to bottom of the lineup, man.
Very true. Saturday can't get here soon enough, and as we are starting to wrap up here, and we got some upcoming events, but before we do, big announcement here from Woo-Pig Weekly. We're going to shoot for Saturday, coming to you guys live from Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium with a live game day morning show for you guys. We're going to shoot for getting it live. If not, it'll be a recorded show that we'll post out too. But, should be some exciting things as we're starting to do more things here for the fans and get you guys involved and everything like that. So we'll get a link out later this week for you guys to be able to get to that live show. There'll be exciting things coming up for, Arkansas and Woo-Pig Weekly bringing those to you. As we wrap up here with upcoming events, like Seth mentioned, we've got Arkansas Volleyball versus Wisconsin tonight and tomorrow versus number 1 Wisconsin coming into the building, 7:00 for both matchups. Arkansas Soccer will take on Milwaukee at 6:30 on Thursday, August 31st as well. You got Arkansas Volleyball on Friday, September 1st at 7 p.m., taking on Colorado for the first of the Woo-Pig Weekly or Woo-Pig Invitational Tournament in Fayetteville this season. Wish we could sponsor that, but we're not there yet. So, and then of course we just got done talking about it. First football game of the season, Arkansas versus Western Carolina in Little Rock, September 2nd at noon. Again, that's noon, not 3 p.m. So make sure you got your alarm set, get your, yourself ready.
Get your drinks in you early.
Very true. Get started a little bit earlier in the morning. Perfect time for, starting with a breakfast beer.
Mimosas, Bloody Marys, whatever you like.
And then on Sunday, we have Arkansas Volleyball taking on Michigan at 11 a.m. on Sunday, September 3rd. Also, that's for the Woo-Pig Invitational. And then you have Arkansas Women's Soccer at North Carolina, number 4 North Carolina at 1 p.m. on Sunday as well. So a lot of things getting kicked off. Everybody's excited. Football season's here. We're clearly excited. We're going to be bringing you a lot of content, a lot of these things. So don't forget to go and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel or anywhere you find your podcast, such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify, so you don't miss anything we're coming out with. So, thank you for listening to today's episode of Woo-Pig Weekly, and we'll be coming right back here next week.